What's going on, people? My name is Batman, and I want to talk about some recent Battlefield 4 development. So on the 15th of August, we had a Zombies Community event that you probably heard about, and I think you're actually going to start seeing a lot more of these types of things, along with special deals, like, how on the PC you could get a free week of Battlefield 4 for a while, because they have to make this game last a lot longer than they had originally intended. This game's lifespan was supposed to conclude in about 2.5 months, but because Hardline has now been delayed, Battlefield 4 has to stay relevant for the next, I believe, 6 months? Because Hardline isn't going to release until February now. There are two big windows you usually see most product releases come in. The first is leading up to Christmas, which was Hardline's original plan, obviously, and then March is the runner-up time frame. And then February, March, April is sort of the runner-up time frame when everybody's getting back their tax returns. It's a different kind of Christmas. That's when Titanfall dropped, if you'll recall. I certainly can reminisce on numerous occasions throughout my childhood, coming home from school and my mom being all happy and uppity and being like, "Do you want to get a present just for shits and giggles? I just got a few $1,000s back from the government, motherfucker." So Battlefield 4 has to pull like an extra 5 months of relevancy out of its ass. For one, because it needs to keep server populations at a reasonable level, and also because they want to keep players interested and engaged with the Battlefield franchise. The best way to sell a product is to form and maintain emotional connections with your customers. If people get bored of Battlefield 4 after it's been out for a year and they stop playing it for a few months, those emotional bonds are threatened, they grow weaker or cease to exist altogether, and that will negatively impact sales for Hardline, which is obviously already having sales problems to begin with. So just as we saw things like Player Appreciation Month and all these special deals and community events a while back designed to rehabilitate Battlefield 4 after its rocky launch, we're going to see even more of these types of things going forward in an effort to keep Battlefield 4 relevant and on people's minds and in their news feeds. Now, I wasn't that impressed with the Zombies game mode. Call me a cynic. What it is a variant of the Infected game mode you see in Halo or COD. There aren't actual zombies, right? It's just one team can only use melee attacks. And I was actually kind of let down because when I originally saw the poster they released for it, it doesn't actually mention that it's just the traditional Infected game mode we've seen from plenty of other games at this point. The advertisement is all talking up the zombie apocalypse, and my first thought was that they were bringing in something similar to Onslaught mode from Bad Company 2. For those of you who didn't play that game, Onslaught was a DLC cooperative wave defense mode that took place against AI on the MP maps. And I thought they were doing that except with zombies. That was my first instinct, but in retrospect that was kind of naive of me. That would be essentially, an entire new expansion pack and certainly wouldn't be just a day-long event. I think I might have assumed it was bolder than it was just because at this point I feel like they need to take some bolder action to stay afloat. It's kind of rough times for Battlefield, obviously, and I don't think this Zombies event was bold enough. And I think Battlefield's rough times are going to last for at least through Hardline's lifespan, because again, like I was talking about in earlier commentaries, even if Battlefield Hardline comes out and it's pretty cool, which it very well could be, I don't think it will be enough to blow us away. And again, that's because it's still being handicapped by the old-gen consoles. But like I've said, one big incredible game could turn everything around, and Star Wars Battlefront might be that game. But based on my time with the Hardline beta, unless they come out with essentially a brand new game, I don't think it's going to deliver the redemption that they're looking for. However, what's interesting is that Hardline should, in theory, have a very short lifespan, because we know that Star Wars Battlefront is coming out next year, presumably in the fall. Actually, we know it has to be in the fall because Hardline is taking up the only other slot when these big titles launch, which is early spring. And it'll actually release right before the new Star Wars movie debuts. I know I was speculating that the movie would be a summer release. I have since been informed that it's actually going to be a Christmas time release, but they're not going to want to have Hardline competing with Battlefront because I'd imagine Battlefront itself is going to adopt a formula very similar to that of traditional Battlefields. The original Star Wars Battlefront games were basically Star Wars reskins of the original Battlefield games, or at least perceived that way by many players who had played both, and that's why it made so much sense for DICE to take on this project, and I think EA is putting a fat amount of its eggs in the Star Wars Battlefront basket. So what'll be interesting is, Hardline will probably have to shit out all of its DLC super quickly to make room for Star Wars Battlefront. I don't know how many expansion packs it will get, but I know they usually plan out the DLC releases even before the game is launched. This game was supposed to have a year-long lifespan. Now that's been condensed into what'll probably be about a 7-month lifespan at the most. So also something to keep in mind, word to the wise, you know, if you're going to buy this game and then buy the season pass, that's $110 for probably 7 months of relevancy until Battlefront comes out, and then you're going to have to probably spend another $110 for that game and its season pass. So that's something to keep in mind in regards to Hardline. You know, if you're not that excited about it, maybe just skip it. So its lifespan has almost been cut in half, or it's lost, you know, at least 5 months of its lifespan. And I'm assuming they'll do at least 3 expansion packs, but probably they'll do 4, just like every Battlefield and Call of Duty has done for the last couple of years. And if that's the case, the developers are going to basically be at their desk writing code nonstop from now until Battlefront launches, which is roughly a year from this month. Because at the moment they're trying to revamp Hardline, and then as soon as it releases, they have to start building DLC that will release rapid fire. It'll be rapid fire DLC releases, you know, like once every 90 days approximately. And that's sketchy because Battlefield expansion packs aren't a walk in the fucking park. If they're going to live up to the Battlefield DLC from the past, they're going to have new weapons and vehicles from time to time, and of course new Levolution events, and the maps themselves are fucking huge and they have destructible environments. Now you'll probably see a similar timeline for Hardline to that of Titanfall, which released in March, and Titanfall has gotten its DLC out so far without a hitch. But Titanfall's DLC isn't very complex. It's only 3 maps and nothing else, no weapons or vehicles, and they don't have to worry about destruction or Levolution or any of that. There's still quite a few hurdles that Visceral has left to clear, and I hope their people have some serious fucking stamina, because it's going to be a brutal year for them. You know, EA tried really hard to annualize this series and stumbled on their own incompetence and arrogance, and poor Visceral is stuck feeling the burn. And I've already talked about how I'm worried the Hardline launch might be plagued with malfunctions the same way Battlefield 4 was, simply because Visceral might not have time to properly quality test all the new stuff they have had to unexpectedly stick into the game. But now I'm even more worried about the DLC being a clusterfuck, just like Battlefield 4 DLC had major fuck-ups and even caused fuck-ups on the rest of the game. Like, remember when Naval Strike first released and suddenly there was an invisible box around players that grenades could bounce off of, and that was taking place even on the vanilla maps, which you thought would be unrelated to the DLC. That could very well happen with Hardline, because once they, you know, finish building the vanilla game, they're not even going to have time to take a shit before they have to start grinding out DLC. And to make things worse, I'm sure that at this point, office morale is pretty low. I'm sure most of the staff is able to put it together that the game they've spent all this time working on fell flat with their audience. There are delays for a game when it's not ready to launch and the devs are unable to meet certain deadlines, but those kind of delays are predictable at a certain point and are implemented and announced before the marketing campaign begins, so that the marketing campaign itself can also be delayed. This delay was announced well after the marketing campaign was in full throttle. This was a last-minute delay with, you know, they had their betas and trailers up and all that jazz. They were ready to go. They were in full-on market mode, and then they had to put the fucking brakes on it, you know? And that means the product, based on consumer research, was failing, and EA knew that if they were going to turn a profit on it, they had to do something drastic. And this was very drastic. I've talked about before how, you know, they're sacrificing Christmas. That's how drastic this is. And I'm sure that the developers must know that. In fact, I'm sure to some extent they've been explicitly informed that the product fell flat with their audience, because that's specifically why they have to continue building this game that they thought they were finished working on. It's no big secret that the quality of a product suffers if the people behind it are in a bad mood. But of course, this is what happens with annualized franchises. When you're just cramming everything through the conveyor belt as quickly as possible, everything has to go off without a hitch, because one problem can jam the whole system and fuck everything up. And it is annualized. I know EA has come out and made some statement about how the series isn't actually annualized, but that's a lie. Alright, they released that statement because the Battlefield community didn't want annualization, specifically because the community predicted a scenario similar to what has actually happened with Hardline, a continuous copy and paste of the game with little innovation and a huge potential for error. That's why the Battlefield community has been so positive about the delay. They don't want things rushed, they want them perfected. Now granted, no Battlefield title will be coming out in 2014, but obviously they wanted Hardline to come out this year, they just failed to pull it off. But say it had come out in 2014, and then Star Wars Battlefront comes out in 2015, and Battlefront won't have the Battlefield name on it, but again, I imagine it will be very similar in terms of its gameplay. We know it's on the same engine, or at the very least the size and scope of the project, and it's being built by the primary Battlefield developer. I mean, if Treyarch built a game that was a 60 frames per second Twitch shooter with kill streaks and customizable classes and called it Call of War instead of Call of Duty, kind of like Battlefield to Battlefront, wouldn't we just consider it another annual installment of COD? Annualization is a tightrope. EA has already fallen off of it, and it's going to be very interesting and perhaps extremely educational as far as business class goes to watch how EA manages or mismanages the next year. Please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.